Okay, excellent. Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our Getting to Know CapsimInbox Cultural Awareness webinar, where we're going to be featuring our February version of CapsimInbox that we'll be highlighting with both my colleague Akil Forbes, Business Development Manager, as well as with the author, Dr. Lori Radulovich, who has created not just cultural awareness, but also our brand new business analytics version of Inbox as well. My name is Matthew Schell. I'm Capsim's Market Development Manager, and where I assist all of our different academic and corporate authors with creating custom inbox solutions. Now, as far as the agenda goes for today's webinar, what I thought we would do is start by providing some upfront information on the cultural awareness experience. Then from there, I'll hand it off to Akil, who will walk us through what exactly is CapsimInbox for those of you that may not be aware of our microsimulation suite. And then he'll walk us through the participant experience. At that point, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Lori, who will take us through why she decided to create this particular microsimulation, what were her goals, and what does she hope that students will achieve from this experience. Now, we'll of course be recording today's session. We'll also provide the presentation deck that you'll see today in an email to everybody that registered. But at the same time, we'd be happy to have a Q&A session at the end of today's call. So at any point, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the GoToWebinar chat functionality, and we'll be sure to respond to those at the end. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So to speak briefly as to what exactly is CapsimInbox Cultural Awareness. Well, in this particular version of CapsimInbox, we're going to be putting students in the role of a senior vice president at a manufacturing company that has different locations across the globe, being in the domestic US-based company with their regional components in Germany and China. And this company is going to be overseeing the development of medical genetic testing devices. And for those of you that may be aware of our international simulations, Capsim Global and Global DNA, this might sound familiar to you, and that's actually by design. When we originally started working with Lori on this back in 2019, we wanted to make this a complementary experience. So that way it could be used as either a standalone microsimulation, or it could be used as a nice individual component to your Capsim Global or Global DNA course. Now, in terms of the format of this microsimulation, this is going to be a single 60-minute experience that the students will complete all within one sitting. However, it is a completely self-directed process. And in terms of what are we looking to assess and measure in this particular version of CapsimInbox? Well, we're going to be looking to evaluate the particular leadership style of the student, their understanding of culture at the societal, national, and country level, a little bit of their own individual culture and how that plays a role in their cultural awareness, and then also looking into their decision-making style, communication style, as well as prompting them with a few situations around diversity and inclusion to see how they handle those situations too. But all in all, what this scenario seeks to assess is essentially those key essential cultural awareness skills in a business context, so that way students can become better leaders when working in a more diverse workplace. And of course, Lori will be happy to expand upon this a bit later. But for right now, I'd be happy to turn it over to Akil Forbes, our Business Development Manager, who will be talking a little bit about CapsimInbox and showing us the participant experience. Akil?
Thank you, Matt, so much. So the new platform that really encompasses our microsimulation suite, CapsimInbox, which is a self-driven exercise for students, where we're putting them in the day of a life of a professional who's either in this particular industry that we're trying to, that the theme is around, or is dealing with particular issues that is of this particular theme of this inbox. So we're gonna open up a shell and walk through a shell of the platform and show you the student experience. So Matt is opening up a shell, and this is the first thing that your students are going to see. Again, it's self-driven. So the first thing they're going to see on this dashboard is the Take Assessment, which is this green button in the center. So they're going to click on that and be welcomed to our welcome page, which is going to walk them through, give them a high-level overview of what is to come in this CapsimInbox experience. And actually, their experience is going to follow the ribbon at the top of this screen. So they're going to see this welcome screen, go through a quick self-assessment, get some more context on the role, quick rehearsal, and then enter the inbox itself. So this welcome video, really quick, high level, 1 minute and 30 seconds introduction to this experience. They'll watch that and click the next button to see the skills assessment. So the shell that we're looking at is actually our general management um, as an example, but the skills in particular will change for each inbox iteration. But the assessment is the same. They're going to be pulling this cursor across the scale from 0 to 100 on how comfortable they feel on these particular skills that we're going to assess later on. And they will also have access to a information button. If they want some more context on this particular skill, they can click that information button and get some context from the author, from Capsim, on what this particular skill is. And so from that, pretty quick and easy, they'll move on to the rehearsal and their role. So gaining more context on what role am I playing in this experience? Who do I report to? Who reports to me? And more context on the company that I work for, maybe some company values, maybe an org chart, just to prepare themselves when they're responding to emails on the company culture as well. So they'll take that information in and then jump into the quick rehearsal. So this is a quick shell just to show the students or the participants on how they respond to particular emails. So this one, the first email is just a welcome email, welcoming them to the experience. The second one is just the second email we see listed there is just a quick response, just showing them how they're going to input information. So from here, if you from here, take that in, and now they're entering the inbox itself. So they'll click that green button in the center. And this is the inbox experience. So you'll notice that first thing, that the time will count down from 60 seconds, 60 minutes actually, down to 0. And that's really just an added pressure for the students. There's no reward if they were to finish this experience in 10 minutes and no penalty if they were to go over 60 minutes. Just the added pressure that all professionals have in terms of trying to accomplish a certain amount of tasks in a limited amount of time. But from there, they'll see that their inbox is inundated with emails, all directed either to their team or to them directly. And they will take in the content and pick the best response for this particular scenario or this particular email. And while they're doing that, they will also receive chats, chat features from colleagues, chat features maybe from an external client that they'll have to assess and say, hey, is this pertinent? And then respond accordingly. So after they go through all of these emails and chat features, they can receive their feedback on how they did immediately. So they'll click exit, and the feedback report is actually going to funnel down from broad to very specific. So they'll start out with a percentile based on how they performed in this experience compared to everybody else that went through the same experience. They'll also see a development index, a self-awareness score, but most importantly, at the bottom of this feedback page, they'll see a skill gap score that will remind them where they place themselves in these particular skills that we're assessing, and then based on their responses in the inbox, where the inbox places them. And in some cases, they'll see a confidence builder of, okay, I thought I was a 10 in organizing. The inbox actually places me at a 50. That's a positive skill gap. In other cases, we'll see a negative skill gap where there's room for improvement. Many assessments will leave students with this information of you're stronger in this area, you're weak in these other areas. But in inbox, we like to walk them through an individual development plan to say, okay, there's room for improvement here. What do I do to shorten that gap? And so from here, they'll walk into an individual development plan. And again, it starts out with a welcome video. And under that, they'll see some development tactics and then the skills listed again, not only by score, but by development need. So if they were to go ahead and choose, hey, what steps can I take to improve this particular score? They click that button, the first thing they're going to see is our definition of that particular skill, and then list tactical exercises they can implement in their daily life to build and expand on that skill. They're going to take those, the skills that they are exercises that they choose to implement, set a goal towards them, and then this fleshes out their individual development plan that they can walk away with. They can download this as a PDF. The instructor can see this. They can go back and flesh this out with other skills that they choose to develop. But this is something they can walk away with as a awareness score of this is where I am and this is where I want to be with these particular skills. So that's what the student's experience is going to look and feel like. From here, we're going to jump into the instructor dashboard. This is what the instructor will see. They'll see an overall percentile of how their students performed, also broken down by skills. And then they'll see individual students, their self-awareness score, overall score, completion time, whether or not they completed the individual development plan, and the ability to view that development plan as well. All of this data is exportable to CSV or Excel spreadsheet for AOL purposes or just other documenting purposes. And we also have these skill scores that they can see and review as well. So that is the professor dashboard. So that's the shell of the inbox experience. So from here, I'm going to pass it back to Matt, who's going to introduce the author and start the conversation specifically on the cultural awareness experience. So Matt, back to you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Akil, for that description of the participant and the instructor experience. As Akil mentioned, at this time, I'd be very happy to introduce you all to our featured author of today's version, Dr. Lori Radulovich, creator of both cultural awareness and business analytics. Now, as far as my history with Lori, we actually connected back in 2019, where she was serving as a subject matter expert review for some of our initial inbox versions we were making internally. And after seeing the tool, she decided, I'm going to try my hand at authoring one of these. And she had a variety of topics she wanted to focus on, but first and foremost was going to be cultural awareness. But to talk a little bit about Lori's background, she is currently the Associate Dean of the Undergraduate School of Business and a professor here at Baldwin Wallace, where she is in charge of the development of both their marketing and analytics curriculums. Now, as far as on the corporate side, Lori has been a professional consultant for a number of years now, where she has provided consultative services for both entrepreneurs and several multinational firms, all in combination for over 25 years of experience in the financial industry, in addition to academia. So with that, very happy to turn it over to Lori at this point, who will start by taking us through some of the key points of the CapsimInbox cultural awareness scenario. We'll talk a little bit about the different resources we have, different academic use cases, and how students can improve their development and their awareness of different cultures throughout the experience. So Lori, happy to hand it off to you at this point.
Thank you, Matt. First of all, welcome everyone, and I really appreciate your taking time out of, I know it's a very busy time with all the challenges that we have today, so I very much appreciate your time and want to make sure that I answer your questions. But so I'm going to jump right in, and hopefully if you do have questions, feel free to post those in the chat, and then we will have a Q&A towards the end of this. But I find that it might help if I explain a little bit why I created this. So it all started with when I was doing my doctoral studies. I found that I'm a lifelong learner and I don't like to be put into a box. So I actually ended up doing a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary doctorate, and I found that I was fascinated with cultures and international marketing. And so whenever anybody who's done any doctorate work, they always tell you make sure it's clean. I made mine so big, but I enjoyed the process. And I said, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. So that was the starting point where I started to get familiar with differences in culture. My team, my advisor and such was somebody from a different culture, and we learned after a period of time, maybe 6 years, or I finished in 4 years, that we could actually finish each other's sentences. So that kind of bonding was something that fascinated me. I was also teaching at the time, and I noticed that in my class, students are fascinated, and particularly nowadays with younger generation, they want to travel, they want to experience things, but I'm seeing there's a lot of context and background that was missing. There's a passion to kind of throw yourselves into these different cultures and learn, but there's also the potential to make a lot of mistakes. And at the same time that I was teaching, I began consulting with companies across the globe, and as well as offering some training sessions here in the United States. And these training sessions that I've run have been with firms that are multinational. So a lot of companies fly their operations, sales, attorney, IT department people in from across the world, and we have get-togethers, physical get-togethers where you actually see each other. And some of the things that I was noticing were challenges that these companies had. And even during these sessions, we would open discussions up that would bruise feelings, but there were questions and comments that different cultures were clashing. And until you overcame those issues, the company was actually functioning at a deficit. So I found that that was, again, a passion. I love to learn about people. I've traveled abroad. I travel every summer to a different country, and I found that I was making stupid mistakes about different cultures based on my background. So with all of that said, I found between my own personal experiences of trying to help others and making mistakes myself, that that I decided I needed to dig deeper into this area, and that was what started me on this journey. So my goal was, in developing this simulation, was first of all to share my knowledge and experiences. So a lot of the scenarios are built on some examples or real stories that I have personally experienced, or corporate experiences where there have been challenges. I've worked with mergers and acquisitions. Two companies come together. One's from Germany, one's from the States, and they cannot communicate. And after a year of problems, the company brings me in, and they, after just one day or half a day, they say, "Gosh, I wish we would have put some time into this ahead of now, a year earlier, so we wouldn't be so far behind and have to fix and overcome some of the problems that we've created by these lack of communication." So that reinforced my desire to create this simulation. And the simulation is very broad in many areas, and I found that, as you can see here on the slide, for example, the skills evaluated include leadership styles. So how you lead a team, how you lead a company, that impacts how others are interpreting your words, interpreting your actions, and how they then respond. So your leadership style is a default function on your own personality as well as your life experiences. If you've never experienced travel or people that are different than you, you tend to not appreciate the diversity that might be there, that diversity can actually open up windows of more opportunities or solutions. So leadership was one area I thought, in corporate leadership, that's important, because as you rise up in a company, you're not only pulling together people from different functional areas, but you're pulling together people from different parts of the world, particularly if you're outsourcing or if you're shipping or manufacturing in different locations. So leading a diverse multicultural team, I felt, was critical. And so I dove into the deeper context of leadership style to see how that impacts culture. Then we also have to layer on multiple cultural aspects. So, for example, what culture is in your country? Are you a collectivist versus a individualistic? So Hofstede's cultural dimensions, everybody most often knows, is one of the foundational theories impacting or defining culture on a global level. Started there and looked at some of those other facets that impact culture, contextual situations, institutional structures, reward systems, financial systems. So in countries, that culture is very diverse, and it can be diverse at multiple levels at a country level. Then I thought, individuals grow up in different regions, different backgrounds, different family styles, and have different social networks, and looked at social network theory. I'm published in some international journals on social network theory, and I realized that also plays a role into how you behave, how you act, how you interpret, and how you perceive the world around you, and how you develop attitudes towards things. Those three then help influence or have an impact on your decision-making style. Do you make quick judgments? Are you asking questions to get to know the other person more? Are you questioning your own assumptions? So decision-making style is another facet of how you implement and perceive culture, cultural styles, and your teams, how you manage your teams. The other aspect is you think about body language, how the words you choose, specific words that you choose, the way that you phrase, the pace of your language, you know, how you react to a person, physical distance. I've been teaching, I would often wander around the room and I realized that I was invading the space of certain cultural students that felt I was too close, and they would shut down, put their head down, and not listen to me. And so I delved into that, had some conversations with students, and depending on where you're from, and this student was from Tanzania, and I thought, oh my gosh, I really need to explore culture at a individual level, understand how I'm communicating, body language, the words I'm using, my eye contact, my hand motions. Those kinds of things are often misinterpreted, and that creates problems. And then, you know, not to put diversity inclusion last, but your own cultural background, your life experiences represent the framework through which, or I call it a cultural lens, through which you see others and see the world. And as a result, you tend not to be as inclusive. It's more of a, if you study social categorization theory, you observe something and you say, oh, it's like this. So you're placing like-minded or diverse things in different categories. And that needs to be understood and broken down. So my overall goal, we can get very deep here, I'm happy to go that route, but my overall goal was, first of all, to increase everyone's awareness of culture and the multifaceted aspects of culture that is integrating multiple areas across disciplines. Management is the leadership style. Country culture is international marketing, international business. Individual culture can be at a consumer level, or it can be from a personal level, or social, or you know, psychological theory. Decision-making style, that's management. Communication style, that's public relations and communications. And then diversity and inclusion, I think, should cross all areas. So I found that I needed, and again, if you're getting the hint, I needed to pull these all together. I wanted to pull it all together to make an impact in the world and make an impact with this simulation. So I chose two very diverse, I felt, countries, one being China, one being Germany, which I felt were somewhat at extremes, and China would be an Asian culture that's extremely diverse from the US. So I tried to pick companies that, or countries, I'm sorry, countries where the individual would be challenged as they go through this simulation, and your assumptions would play out as you responded. So what happens is, in the simulation, as I was crafting the scenario, some of it is intended to make you think things, and then how you perceive that actual response. When somebody writes an email, you have a perception on how they're writing, what that person's like in that email, and then you actually make assumptions. So that's a psychological attitude measure, and then you do a behavior, you respond a specific way. So I'm trying to capture attitudinal data, I'm trying to capture behavioral by how you respond, and then how you're communicating, how you're perceiving, and then responding back to that person in the words you choose, the directness, the non-directness, the information gathering and such. So it's crafted, each of the questions are crafted very, with a lot of thought behind them, and the subtle nuances are built into the questions so that you're often on a response scoring an individual on more than one of these dimensions. And so and I could go on and on and on. So I think at this point, maybe it might help to kind of go to the next slide, Matt, if you would please. I could talk a little bit about some of the resources, but really a little deeper into some of the things that are helpful to you as a faculty member, because you can get lost in the weeds in culture, I've discovered, but I enjoyed that process and I'm happy to go down there. But there's a student resource, but there's also a professor resource, and that was something that I developed. And you know, I love input. If there's things that you need, I'm happy to do conversations one-on-one, or meet with you virtually at this point in time because of the COVID situation. But I'm happy to have conversations. I think we learn a lot more. But student resources are great. And what I also feel that this cultural awareness inbox provides each student the opportunity to craft their own improvement. And I felt that that is important simply because we all are very unique and very different and very special. And so if we had a one-size-fits-all development process, we will not be tapping into the full potential of each student. So each student is going to score perhaps stronger in certain areas, weaker in others. And so they're what we call the individual, development plan for each person would be customized for each person within the simulation based on how they score and what exercises are recommended. And I did this simply because I found in a corporate environment, if you ever do work and do consulting or training, your human resources or talent development want to see development at an individual level. So I felt that was critical. It's not a one size fits all. There's a lot of resources there that's built into the simulation that will do this for you as an instructor in your classroom. So I think students find that it's extremely helpful. Comments back from students to me have said they've actually identified with some of the characters and the fake characters I've created in it. They feel sorry for this person who's working too much. This other person gets all bent out of shape and gets angry about things, and that's intentional within the simulation. But students who take this, corporate people who take this, get engaged and identified and actually have feelings and worry about some of these people. I've had students tell me I felt like I was really at work and answering these kind of questions. So that was actually another goal, to be able to help a student transition to the corporate world and be able to learn how to use email and respond appropriately. So this is actually testing you on a true behavioral test. How are you responding in a scenario? So it's almost like walking and making decisions. So emails are coming at you, you have to respond. So you don't have a whole lot of time to think about it. So it's tapping into more of your default reaction as opposed to heavy thinking and doing what you think is right. This is really testing the student at the level of how they would behaviorally respond. And I think that's a truer test. And what I also found that I included in here was I studied diversity for a while, and inclusivity and the appropriate ways to handle situations. I built that into here because I believe in my college, I'm an advocate for not necessarily calling it diversity because that means differences. I say that we should celebrate cultural learning, cultural awareness, cultural differences, celebrate it instead of talking about differences. And so we try to look at what are some of the great things that you can learn from the different cultures, the food. In my classroom, we do deep dives, and we live a day in Brazil. We live a day in, different countries. We do wedding ceremonies, different things to help students really appreciate what is the nice and the nuances of culture. So I think at this point, Matt, I can share with everyone, yes, the objectives, and just to kind of pin it down a little bit for a faculty member. And I'm happy to answer any kind of questions specifically about how do you do this in a classroom or whatnot. But I thought it might be helpful for you to see some of the ways that I've used this and perhaps the way that you can. So on the left-hand side, we see cultural sensitivity is the goal initially. It's an awareness that you have a culture, others have different cultures, and that you need to be sensitized to them and the fact that you need to increase your sensing skills just to be able to pick up on subtle cues and differences between you and the other person. And this could even happen within two individuals who were born in the US. There are cultural differences, period, in every individual. I'm a high sensor, and so I'm always looking for that. And so the things that you say can actually hurt and create barriers, emotional barriers, barriers from the fact that somebody's not listening to you, so you shut down, avoid them, or become angry, or just don't listen to them anymore. So a sensitivity, I think, is first and foremost realizing that you should be doing this all the time. If you're not, your company is not optimizing its performance, you're not having everybody contributing, you're not looking and listening and hearing everybody's ideas, different ways of thinking outside the box. So first and foremost, you have a cultural lens that you're seeing the world, and every lens is a bias. It's a positive, but it's also a negative. So I said culture is a positive and a negative because it stops you from seeing other things or being open. So you have this interpretation bias that you see the world, and so we need to recognize specifically in each and every one of us what are the strengths and weaknesses of us and our backgrounds and our experiences so that we can be a little more open and actually improve ourselves as well as the other individuals. And I say here, there's the objective is that you have a repertoire of responses, and that's only as good as your own past history. So the more experiences you get, the better you are. So appreciating diversity, I celebrate it, to actually have a link to improve your team. And that's critical in today's corporate environment. I teach at a school where we're very applied approach. So whatever I teach, I need to bring it to the bottom line. How does that impact your company's ROI, earnings per share? So culture creates barriers that does not allow your teams to function at an optimal level, create the most potential solutions and have open discussion about those, which reduces the corporate financial impact. And so if you can improve as an individual, you're actually going to have, in my mind, a better opportunity to have a better career simply because you're sensing more and you're taking in more information, and you're a better team player. Your people will like you more. So on the right-hand side, a list of some classes that I've used the simulation in, and those that I would recommend. It fits extremely well into any kind of international marketing, international business class. But what we have done is used this simulation as a pre-test to inform some of our international students, particularly when they travel to diverse and very diverse cultures. So we have trips where some of our students have gone to China. We have a seminar where they learn about things, but learning is knowledge and it's not behavior. So spitting back, test answers on an exam, that's not living in a culture, that's not responding to a culture. So this cultural inbox, the inbox has been used to prep and test students if we believe they're ready to study abroad. It's also potentially used in any kind of business communications to talk about your bias and the ways that you communicate. Change management. If you're, again, I've had merger and acquisitions where I've consulted on, and if you don't get in early enough and test what you're dealing with, then you have problems that cannot be reversed. And so here's a list, some of the other ones, entrepreneurs that are starting business, particularly if they're going abroad. Any kind of company that plans on doing any international procurement or international delivery of products or services. Services are extremely hard because they're intangible products. And so you have to have a higher level of sensing as opposed to if you're selling just a physical product. There's still mistakes you can make in physical products in the wording and the visuals and the advertisements, but when you're dealing with people in services, it complicates the potential for errors. So I have a full list here. I won't go through all of them, but I'm happy to answer any kind of cases that or how it might fit into your class. And so on the next slide, we can see the often we use it as I'm an assessment person, and so we use it as a pre and a post test. So you can do it at the beginning of your class and at the end of your class. You could do it as I would recommend it as a potential sophomore year, and then again at a senior year if you wanted to do it as a wider, broader experience to see the development of the individual. You can look at the increase in score. You can normalize the scores of the individuals if you want to see just a one-time example within a class as an exercise, and it often opens up a breadth of scenarios where individuals will say, well, hey, what happens in this kind of case? And I disagree that I think they would be doing this other kind of thing. So reflection essays can also be added to this, and this is something that I find extremely helpful because you can guide people in those directions as well. So I'm happy to throw it back to Matt to see if we have anybody who's posted any questions in particular, and if we need to leave the slide up, or if you want to move on to some other things, I'm happy to do so.
Yeah,
Thank you, Matt.
absolutely. Thank you very much, Lori. I very much appreciate the detailed description. As Lori had mentioned, of course, everyone, if you do have any questions, feel free again to enter them into the chat. We just have one or two final things to discuss with you, and then we'll go ahead and open it up to Q&A. So happy to answer any questions that you'd like to submit. But to Lori's point, this particular version of CapsimInbox has gone through a variety of different validation, processes where we've not only built it, of course, on Lori's experience, but we've also put this out there to, piloting with students, all throughout the development process, as well as received several subject matter expert reviews on this particular topic to really increase both the reliability and the validity of the assessment at this time. And it's grown to be one of our more popular versions of Inbox, only over the course of a year that it's been released at this time. But what's kind of nice about that is not only do we kind of get that validation with many of our professors such as yourselves, but we've actually gotten a lot of recognition over the course of 2020 with not just CapsimInbox as a platform, but with cultural awareness specifically. In fact, we're very happy to share that, in the middle of last year, that our CapsimInbox platform was actually chosen to be the winner of 2 EdTech Cool Tool Awards. The first one being for the Cool Tool winner for a professional skills solution. But also we won the Trendsetter Award, which is pretty big for us, for the product or service that's setting a trend for the workforce. So we got a little bit of that from the educational side. And then if you look at it from more of a corporate side in terms of validation, we were very happy to hear that in December of last year, we were selected for the gold medal winners of 2 Brandon Hall Group Awards as well. One in particular for CapsimInbox as the best advance in gaming or simulation technology. And then to bring it back directly to Lori's experience, the very authoring platform that she utilized to create this very experience was chosen for the gold medal for the best advance in content authoring technology as well. So, very excited at the response we've been getting from this experience, and very happy to hear about the experience that you all have with it as well as part of the February pilot pass. But with that, what I'll go ahead and do is I'll go ahead and bring us to the final slide here, just giving some initial resources how you can contact us. As mentioned, we're providing free access to cultural awareness to as many students as you'd like, as often as you'd like during the month of February. And if by chance you may have a particular time you'd like to administer a little bit past that, we're happy to make an exception as well, of course. Now, while this initiative for the CapsimInbox Pilot Pass is technically exclusive to current Capsim users, if you do have any colleagues that you'd like to share this with, we'd be more than happy to include them in here as well. Now, as you receive the recording of this demonstration, as well as the presentation deck here, you'll find our contact information. Please feel free to reach out to myself, Akil, or even Dr. Radulovich if you have any specific questions around the content of the simulation. We'd be happy to address those. And in fact, within this PowerPoint deck, you have a hyperlink there you'll see under Demo Access that will allow you to instantly create a student account. That way you can go through the very experience that they would see themselves, along with some additional information about our CapsimInbox Pilot Pass landing page at the bottom that'll detail this initiative and how we're going to continue this all throughout the course of 2021. So with that, I'd like to conclude the presentation section, and at this time we'll move to Q&A. I'm going to take a brief moment here. If anybody does have any questions, please feel free to submit them at this point. We'll give everybody about 10 seconds and then we'll start with some questions. Okay, so we've got our first questions coming in here. I'll just give it one more second. Okay, Lori, so we have our first question from the audience. How do you bridge the gap with faculty who are focused on diversity and reject the concept of approaching issues on the basis of cultural awareness?
That's a very, very important and excellent question. It's commonplace. People tend not to see diversity as integrated with culture, but I think I'm lucky on the university where I live that we have a very diverse group of faculty. So if it's in an academic situation, I would perhaps get a group together to talk about the diversity and challenges that you're facing, and have someone in that group, both from I like my social sciences. Some social sciences don't get along with business school and whatnot, but we get along. I reach across the aisle a lot. I reach across the university. I've created interdisciplinary type programs and degrees. So it is important to have, everybody has a voice of this. Bring the different schools together, bring people from philosophy, because their mental way to approach a question or some of the things that you might assume are a certain behavior this way can be seen through a different lens. Again, I think faculty discussions, faculty awareness is a starting point, And then from there, because, you know, we all need to be aware of diversity and inclusivity at this point in time. And I think couching it under, let's talk about some challenges, because we are in the environment where, you know, having these conversations and difficult conversations is important. And I think it's at the forefront right now. So I think you have a perfect opportunity to reach across to multiple people, bring it together and say, you know, my university is a very a heavy arts school, and we're known, we have a lot of students that go to Broadway. So we have a lot of candidates that are, or individuals and students that are transgender, you know, non-gender, fluid genderness. So I love our culture here. We're very open about a lot of things, and I think sharing that, but having the right professional resources or professional people there to talk about these kind of things. So initially, I would recommend working with faculty across different disciplines, talking about these things, and you'd be surprised, anybody who teaches an international course has these kind of conversations in their classes. They don't see the linkages. So pulling those together, one way is to approach it from assessment. How do we assess international across the university? How do we talk about these diversity issues? And then once the faculty start that discussion, you could then take it to students, because students are very engaged and have strong opinions. And I think that's important to bring them into the fold and have open conversations. I hope that answers your question.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that response, Lori. We do have another question. I'll give to you just in 1 second. We do have a question that are the links active within this particular PowerPoint? So not through the GoToWebinar link right here. However, we will have that when we send it to you in an email. So not active within the presentation currently, but those will be active when you receive the recording. We do have a question, Lori. We have a professor who said, we literally just approved a certificate in leadership at my university, and this sim will fit great into my capstone course for that program. Lori, do you have a best practices for DEI or EDI, respectively, in academics by chance?
I wonder if you could clarify a little bit what you're looking for. You know, I think we do have management and leadership here. So if you want to chat anything in there, please feel free to direct me a little further. Leadership is something that, and let me give you some background. I used to teach an introduction to management class, and we realized it's not only managing, it's leading. So we changed our whole curriculum to focus on leadership as opposed to just managing. And you can lead a team, you can lead a university, you can lead a corporation, you can be a leader in your family. And I think being a leader and stepping out and is the first start to this, and realizing, I think reflecting on how you're projecting is critical, because a leader, sometimes they have charisma. You know, somebody said, oh, Laura, you have charisma. I said, I don't think so. But trying to understand, why did that person think that of me? So understanding your own personal brand, and this links into marketing too, your branding identity. What are your personal brand putting forth? How's that impacting others around you? And you can even weave in 360. So I am a person who likes to customize, if you haven't figured that out already. So I do a lot of custom designs, and I'd be happy to talk with you a little bit more. Just, you know, if you wanted a little bit, if you could give me a little more guidance, what you're looking at, or I'm happy to work with you and have some conversations there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just for clarity, Lori, we did get a response. EDI, equality, diversity, and integration specifically.
Okay. We call it diversity and inclusion. Everybody has their own different best practices. One, first of all, is conversation and having, and I will say some diversity officers, we have a specific diversity office on campus. We've elevated that position and provided the whole staff there with training. All faculty have gone through multiple levels of training. I have certificates of going through diversity and inclusion and kind of certificates. So there's training out there, but that's not testing enough, I don't think. It's a very unidimensional approach to diversity. I think that we need to talk, instead of diversity being different and it's negative, I love culture, because culture says everybody's unique, everybody's special, so everybody has some history. So whether that's food, you can go at it like, let's share food and let's learn and taste, do taste testing. That's different than saying, oh, you're from that country that eats these kinds of things. I'm all about diving into an experience and learning from that experience. So really, depending on what your challenges are, I would develop the program to kind of overcome those barriers. But I think, first of all, self-reflection and increasing sensitivity and awareness is the start. And then how you dialogue and communicate with others is the next step. Because if you're not aware of what you're doing and what your biases are, then the second part, communicating, is still going to be a failure. Or you're going to be communicating one way but feeling a different way. So they all need to work together. There has to be an alignment, and it has to be true. Otherwise, you're just, walking the walk. You're not really believing in this. And I truly believe in this.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that response as well, Lori. I'd like to give everybody one final chance to submit your question if you'd like. But in the meantime, Lori, if we to conclude today's webinar, I have a question for you. If you were,
Okay.
well, actually, we do have one more here. Would you please talk a little about how we might use the results available to faculty in the admin dashboard in an aggregate form to inform continuous improvement of our curricula? So actually taking the outputs of the simulation, Lori, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, I do this myself. I'm the associate dean, and so what this is not intentional, and Matt did not pay me to do this. So I'm looking at scores within classrooms and specific faculty to see if there's consistent trends that a certain faculty is doing wonderful things in the classroom, and the students are actually learning that concept and those skills better. Now, or if there's a faculty member that needs some additional training or some sharing of best practices from, where I might take a younger faculty into an older faculty, or even an older faculty into a younger faculty's classroom, share the examples, share the exercises. I'm very collaborative. Now, I do understand some faculty believe some of the things are intellectual property, and I completely understand that because I have my own intellectual property. But I think when you're looking at student outcomes, sharing one or two exercises as far as looking at how are you doing in the classroom from a faculty perspective, and how are your students walking out after that? What is their feelings about things, about, what are your evaluations? I know at my university, student evaluations are extremely important in promotion and tenure. So linking each classroom and how the students are coming out of there, what kind of scores are they doing on an individual or an average of each class. Dr. A's class scores are 50%, Dr. B's class, scores 60%, the third professor so-and-so, they always score 80%. Well, that third person is doing something unique in there. Not that he's giving the answers, but there's something happening in there, and I would want to learn more. So as a chair or as an associate dean, I'd probably sit in on that faculty member, have some conversations, say, you're really doing some great things. Would you mind sharing? Those kinds of things I think can build bridges and barriers and develop students. And so then taking that back to your assessment reports and looking at the closed loop. So you have to have assessment. This is what's happening. These are where we have differences. Then you have to plan, what are your action plans to address those? And then you have to go back and say, okay, we've implemented these. What is the impact of those implementations? Was there an improvement, or did it actually get worse or stay the same? So a closed feedback loop one time, and then sharing that information with the faculty to then go a second feedback loop. So I look at multiple feedback loops to see how these results can be taken forward to improve student experience, student learning, linking in also to university ULOs, university outcomes. Culture and diversity and international, or an I is what we call an I and a D in my university. Those are priority learning objectives for the university. So this links the whole way up to university learning outcomes. So I do that at an individual assignment level, up to a classroom, classroom outcome on a syllabus, and then taking that to a program outcome, matching that program outcome then to university outcomes. So I could go on assessment, but everybody will go to sleep. But from an assessment perspective, and that was a joke, assessment perspective, this fits very much in. The other thing that's important that I personally choose CapSim, it's an external third party. So you don't have a faculty member testing a certain learning outcome with their own instruments. So we're looking at method bias. So by using a third party, it allows you to step outside of that classroom and have assessment from an external party. And from higher learning commissions or ACSB or AC, whatever, all the different A's, you have a third party external validation of assessment. And when I developed this cultural awareness inbox, I was very cognizant and put that on the front burner because I thought it was important that I use external validation to examine faculty, and I felt that this would be another. And I didn't want to talk about that up front, but I think that's critical. I think you have to have that. Otherwise, you're not getting fresh ideas or having good conversation about what's happening in a classroom. And that same thing happens in a corporate environment too. Bringing external consultants in can be two things. One, either to stamp an approval on any kind of management changes, but I'm the kind of a person that's going to go and say, I'm going to tell you what I see, whether you like it or not, because that's the money you're paying me. So I'm a real honest person, and I think that's gained me a lot of cash out there in the world. So I hope that answers some of those other questions.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And thank you to the audience member for that particular question. Lori, for the final question for today's webinar, we've talked about this at length, of course, but I figured, if to ask you the question, if the audience today were to take away one thing, if you were to put it in a phrase or an eloquent way, what would you say is the one thing that makes CapsimInbox cultural awareness really prepare the students for the real world above all else?
I think it tests behavior. You're not sitting in a classroom, you're reading a book and giving back an answer that a teacher is grading based on, there's different, taxonomies. This is actually testing at the highest level, I think. It's testing, first of all, it is testing your awareness of business terms. Do you understand the emails? Do you understand international marketing concepts? Do you understand operational concepts? Trying to coordinate. So you have a knowledge of your domain. It's testing. That's pretty simple. That should be in all kind of tests, and I think faculty are very good at that. But then when we go a little higher, this involves critical thinking. So again, it's a situation. Critical thinking can be tested in a classroom on a problem solving. But this is, you have, when you add the time pressure and students see, oh my God, I have an hour to do this, I have to make decisions. And so they start feeling an intentional pressure. And that's to force students to actually default to the behavior that they really think that, that they're going to come through, that they've grown up with. So this is a behavioral test. It's a scenario thrown at them. They're living this person's life for an hour. And so they walk out of there, you've got behavioral testing. So it'd be like just following somebody around for an hour. You have behavioral testing with all kinds of scenarios that come in here. And so not only do you, the assessor, have this behavioral information, but what's really cool is the student walks away and these scenarios stick with the students. It's not like they memorize the term and they forget. They're going to remember this when they go into the workplace. And they have said that this is exactly how the workplace is. You get texts that are popping up. You get stressed over the text. You have emails. So I think the real life, I guess I've been a little long-winded, but the real life aspect of it is testing behavior, and that is a transition from the academic world over into corporate. So it's getting them ready for that environment. So that's a whole nother thing to talk about in your classroom.
Excellent. Well, very, very, very well put, Lori. And with that, we'll go ahead and conclude today's webinar. We hope that you all found this very informative. We hope that you all get a chance to try this out in your instruction during the month of February. I would like to thank you all for your time, and I'd like to give a big thanks to Dr. Lori Radulovich for her time today during the webinar to field these types of questions and to really show the value of this type of assessment in academia. So with that, we'll go ahead and conclude, and we will send the webinar as well as the presentation deck you see here, which will include all the embedded links to you all shortly. So thank you all for your time again, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.